Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 5th webinar in our Advocacy webinar series, Planning Constituent Visits. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lauren Robertson, and I'm the Digital Advocacy Manager here at Child Care Aware of America. If you have been on one of these webinars in the past, you will have heard my voice before, and you'll also hear some familiar voices today from other Child Care Aware staff. So before we get started, we want to remind you of that goal we have for this webinar series. Our goal is to expand the advocacy capacity for CCR&R providers and family advocates at the state level. You are all on mute right now, but we want this to be as interactive as possible. So ask questions throughout via the chat box. The webinar will be recorded and available soon after the completion of the webinar once we upload it online. And we will have a couple poll questions throughout, so make sure you participate in those. And to join the Child Care Works movement, you can go to childcareworks.org. So today we are going to be talking about planning constituent visits. So we're going to focus a lot on one-on-one meetings, but we're going to also talk about how to get other kinds of face time with your elected officials, what to expect during your visit, crafting your elevator pitch. This is a lot to do. From our last webinar, we had someone say, hey, you know, I know how to craft my story, but how do I make it really short for those quick interactions with my elected officials? So we're going to talk about making it quick, short, and sweet. And then what to bring to your visit, and how to use social media with your visit, and then a couple of Child Care Aware of America resources. With us today, again, I'm Lauren Robertson. We have Chrissy West, our Director of Advocacy, who will be jumping in when she has something to say. She's sitting right next to me and laughing. And we also have Liz Twilley, our Social Media Manager. We're really lucky to have a social media manager on our team, and she's going to talk about how to utilize social media in your constituent visits. So to get started, I'm going to launch the first poll. Just what best describes your role, so we can see who is with us today on the webinar. All right, going to give a couple more seconds. It looks like a majority of folks are CCR&R staff. Thank you so much for being on the webinar. We're so happy you're here. We have some nonprofit staff members. All right, I'm going to close up that poll and show you the results so you can see who is here today on our webinar. So thank you for being here today. If you have any questions about how to better incorporate this, the content of this webinar into your role, feel free to type that in or send us an email as well. All right, the next webinar, or the next poll question is, I feel blank about planning constituent visits with my elected officials. Unsure, confident, totally in the dark. How are you feeling today? Some folks are saying they're confident. Others are saying unsure. A couple are saying totally in the dark. As always, my goal for you all today is if you're totally in the dark, I want to get you to unsure or maybe even confident. And if you're unsure, I want to get you to confident. And if you're confident, I want you to feel even more confident and super, super ready to go. Awesome. I'm going to close that poll. Looks like we have 72% are saying they're unsure, 24% are saying they're confident, and 4% are saying totally in the dark. So we're going to get, my goal is to get that 4% out of totally in the dark today. All right. So I'm really excited to lead this webinar with you all today because I've previously worked for elected officials where I have worked with those constituents to schedule these meetings and also events with elected officials. And so it's kind of fun to be on the other side of that and how to help you get face time with your elected officials, as well as how kind of insider tips of what elected officials are looking for in these visits and how to maximize your time with them. There's many different ways you can meet with your elected officials. We have a couple of examples up here. So there are structured meetings that are one-on-one, and if you're meeting with your federal representative, so House of Rep or Senate, you're probably going to be meeting with your staff, especially if you're in your local district. You may have more time to dive into those stats and be able to leave more content with them and really have a conversation. But there's other opportunities like town halls and lawmaker forums that are focused on a specific topic that are also great opportunities to make your voice heard for your elected officials and for your community. At town halls, you may need to sign up right when you arrive. So a lot of times it's about getting there early, getting a place in line, and lining up for that to be able to speak. But you have much more limited time. So you really want to focus on your personal story and legislative ask, but the benefit of that is that people in the room will also hear it. So if you feel like you're alone with your story and you share your story at your town hall, you might be surprised to see who else has the same experience and can connect with you on that. So other opportunities include office drop-bys. So if you've ever done this before, a lot of times this means walking literally into the office, whether it's at the Capitol building or into your city hall, and seeing if the elected official is available to chat, or if a staff member is available to chat, and if not, leaving some information, leaving them a one-pager with your contact information. This is really if you want to contact multiple people in one day. This is a really quick way to get information out and to make that contact with staff. Elected officials often have coffees or little community get-togethers in their districts to connect with constituents, and they're open to all constituents. I know that I used to work for a city council member, and she would have beers with Bender at a local brewery, and those were open times to come and talk to her about anything, and that was a great opportunity to get FaceTime with her in her busy schedule. And she also brought staff with her, so if she was busy, she could, like talking to someone else, she always had a staff member available to chat with you. And then elected officials go to community events to connect with constituents and to, up their profile. And those are also opportunities to talk to them about issues. I think it can be kind of daunting to go up to an elected official and talk to them about anything, but they're humans too, and they are there to talk and to hear your story as a constituent. And we're also going to touch on this a little bit today, are inviting lawmakers to visit high-quality childcare. So we've actually created a couple of resources that we're going to post online and talk about today about if you don't go to them, have them come to you, have them see what quality childcare looks like in their community. So how to get on their schedule can seem daunting if you've ever looked. I remember managing the calendar of my city council member, and it was like 7 things from like 10 to 12. Like, how are you going to go to those many things? So it's important to call in advance and get on their schedule, but also be flexible. So you can check the Town Hall Project, which is a great website which shows lots of different community events with elected officials, but also elected officials' websites will have lots of events that might not show up on the Town Hall projects. And so you can just show up and be ready to talk to your elected officials. So if you want to schedule a one-on-one meeting, the easiest way is to contact the local district office that you are trying to work with. Usually completing the form on the website is the best way because that's the way that they triage requests. They might be, okay, this request is about childcare, that's going to our childcare person. This request is about transportation, that's going to our transportation person. But not all websites have that request form. Some just have an email, some just have a phone number. If you are unsure, just call the office and they will direct you to the right place. It can seem really daunting to call an office, but as long as you're just asking, I want to meet with the elected official and I want to know the best way to get on their calendar, and you're very polite, they're usually really easy with being like, oh, great, here's the form, I can send you the link, or sure, when do you want to meet? If you are trying to meet your elected official and you end up meeting with staff, that's totally okay. You have to remember that staff is a direct connection to elected officials and often have more time than you do with elected officials. So if you have their ear, that means that they have their elected official's ear. So you have to be especially convincing and get them to share your information with that elected official. And because we are child care advocates, we encourage you to bring your children with you. A lot of times we think of places where elected officials are as not child-friendly, not family-friendly, and as people who work with children every day and work on behalf of children every day, it's important to change that and make sure that these places are family-friendly and remind elected officials why you are there and that children should be at the center of their decisions. So I use this example of how to request a meeting because Senator Tammy Baldwin has a really good website. Not every senator or rep at the federal level or at any local or state level have this user-friendly of a website, but this shows that she really cares about getting in contact with her her constituents, and I'm also a former constituent of Senator Tammy Baldwin, so I thought I would use her as an example of how easy it is to make a scheduling request with elected officials. So you just go on her website if you want to meet with her in DC or in Wisconsin, and you just fill out a little bit of information, and then they get back to you. This is really nice because you know you're not missing any information, but I would generally follow this format when sending an email or calling on the phone. I'm going to actually skip to this one and go back to that one. So when you are calling to schedule an appointment or sending an email, it's important that you identify who you are and introduce yourself as a constituent. Elected officials meet with non-constituents all the time, but constituents are their priority when it comes to meetings and their time. It's really important to be specific about what you're going to talk about and what your legislative request is. A lot of times when elected officials are meeting with constituents, they are briefed by their staff beforehand. So if the staff doesn't really know what you're talking about, or if you say I'm calling to talk about childcare, that might be really general and they don't really know how to prep their elected official. But if you say I'm here to talk about childcare affordability, specifically the Childcare for Working Families Act, they can prepare a little background on stats for their district and what the Childcare for Working Families Act is, so that the elected official can read that before they go in, so that they're not completely a blank slate, and they can actually engage in a conversation with you. And you also want to say who will be attending. If you're going with a group of people, so say you're a CCR&R staff member and you're organizing a group to go meet, you just want to make sure you say how many people are coming, because if you say it's 2 people and then you show up with 8, that can put stress on the staff in the office. So you just want to make sure you're really specific so that they can be prepared and have room for you. It is fun to bring a lot of people and make all your voices heard, but also it's better when they feel more welcoming when they're prepared for all of you. So they don't have staff members like bringing in chairs the entire meeting. I like to say that, it can seem really intimidating going and meeting with an elected official or going and meeting with staff, and especially if you're unfamiliar with, being in the Capitol, how to get someplace. But you are guests in their space, and they should treat you like guests. I know when I worked for elected officials, we always had water, we always had snacks available, because our constituents are the people helping us make decisions, and we can't make decisions on behalf of our people if we don't hear from them. And elected officials often feel the same way, and if they don't, you can keep talking to them and show them that you care about this issue and make them care about it as well. So I included a sample scheduling call script that breaks it down into just the sections that I talked about, and it's very specific. So I talk about that I identify as a constituent. I say I want to talk about childcare affordability, specifically the Childcare for Working Families Act. I'm going to be coming with 2 working mothers from my advocates group, so I'm saying there'll be 3 of us. And let me know about their availability. It's short, it's sweet, it's to the point, but it covers everything that they need to know in order to schedule a call with you. So another resource we have, and we've talked about this a little bit at the beginning, that you don't always have to go to them. They can come to you, and they can be a guest in your childcare center, in your childcare home, to show them what quality childcare looks like. This is a really cool opportunity because elected officials don't get to be out in the community as much as they want to, and this is a really good opportunity to make sure that they are connecting the legislative asks with the actual reality of childcare. So we've created these 2 resources of how CCR&Rs can set up site visits with elected officials, and then how they can support the childcare centers or childcare homes to prepare themselves for these site visits. It can seem like a really daunting task to get, all the logistics down, making sure that they have the right place, making sure they have parking. But if you follow the steps, it's pretty simple, and you just want to be super prepared beforehand. You want to prep the provider, so you want to make sure that they understand what to show, what's a good example, what are good places to highlight, as well as prepping the elected official. You want to make sure you have a packet for them that they can leave with, make sure that the provider has documentation for them as well to show and take with. It can be really impactful because I know, for example, when I've worked for elected officials, they have been like, remember when we did that thing and I got that handout? Can you find that for me? Like they have asked me for those things. So you might think that I just throw it into a pile, but they might be like, remember that map that talked about childcare affordability? I want to look at that. And it might seem like, oh, no one's going to ever look at my information, but they do, and they do rely on you as the experts. So if you have the confidence of an expert when you are inviting elected officials into a childcare setting, they're going to trust you as an expert. Showing off your childcare is a really cool example to show all the hard work you put in every day, as well as showing how policy trickles down to actual impacts in your center or home. I use the example, and this is actually a personal example that I have done when I've toured childcare before. I was touring a family childcare home in St. Paul, and she was talking about how she participates in CACFP in the food program, and she loves it. It really helps with her costs, and she loves that she has healthy food for her children, but the administrative burden is a lot. She showed me the huge binder she had with all the paperwork, and this was my first job out of college when I was working for a CCR&R, and I was amazed and reminded how much work it is to be a childcare provider, and made me think about, like, what can we do to make this a burden, less of a burden through policy. So there are just many things in a visit that can kind of ignite a light bulb in policymakers' heads. And so it's really exciting to bring them into your space. And if you want any support on this, we are happy to help because, one, we love pictures of elected officials with young children and engaging with the childcare workforce. And two, it is a different kind of way to get elected officials engaged and champions for childcare. So if you're doing a one-on-one meeting and you've scheduled that meeting, so you've gone through, you've scheduled it, you have it on your calendar, you're ready to go, this is just a couple of tips that I like to share with folks and that Chrissy and I have talked about of when we prepared advocates, when Chrissy's prepared advocates for their Family Advocacy Summit they had in the past spring. So you want to know who you're meeting with, especially if you're meeting with staff at the state or federal level. They have lots of staff members. So if you're saying I'm meeting with Julie, that's not helpful for the person at the front desk. You want to make sure you come in knowing who you're meeting with and what you're talking about. Your meeting will probably not start on time. There are packed schedules for both staff and elected officials, and they try their best to start on time, but be ready to know that it might start 10, 15, 20 minutes late, which means you want to be flexible with your time. If the meeting is supposed to be from 10 a.m. to 10:30, arrive at 9:50 and expect that you might not see that elected official until 10:30 and get your parking until 11:15 just in case. If you get done early, great, you can walk around the Capitol building or go visit another elected official and do a drop-by, but you want to make sure you have very flexible with your time. And again, if you're given 30 minutes, you'll probably only get 15 minutes. It's not that they don't value you and think you're important, it's that they have so many issues coming at them that they want to hear your story and get on to the next meeting. But because your time is limited, you want to make sure that your meeting is super concise and to the point. And you want to leave time for questions at the end to be prepared for the elected official or staff member to interrupt you while you're speaking. This can seem kind of like jarring if you're in the middle of a sentence and they interrupt you, but that's actually a good thing. It means that they're interested in what you're saying and they want to know more and they are engaged in what you are saying. I really liked the example on our last webinar that I believe Amber shared about how if she's not sure, like if the conversation doesn't seem to be engaging, she always turns it to this elected official or staff member to ask, do you have anyone in your life that has dealt with childcare accessibility? And then often that person has someone, whether that's, one of my staff members, has a hard time securing childcare, or, actually my granddaughter was just born kind of thing. And that turns it on them. So when the story is personal and the elected official or staff member feels like they have a connection, they're going to more likely to remember that interaction, more likely to take action. And when you are leaving them, and the last thing you want to do, you want to make sure that they have something to do when you leave that door. Whether they're a staff member and they're going to go talk to their elected official about supporting a bill, whether they're an elected official and they're like, I'm going to go sign on to that bill, or maybe it's, I just want you to consider what a solution could be for X problem. And it's really great to bring materials with you and have 1 to 2 copies ready to leave on it behind. Again, they will use these or refer back to these and might share them with another office, or, often elected officials are going into each other's offices, and if they have that laying out, another elected official could be like, oh, childcare affordability, I heard about that, but I don't know much about it. And they have that handout right there that they can be like, sure, take that handout and let's do this together. And finally, but probably most importantly, pics or didn't happen. If you share on social media what a great meeting you had with elected official, that's good for you and for the elected official. And they'll see that tag and they're going to be like, oh yeah, I had a great meeting with that person. And now I have photo evidence of it. So make sure that you are taking pictures. So on our last webinar, Effective Storytelling in Advocacy, we talked about crafting your childcare story. And you can refer back to that. It's much a deeper dive with some great personal stories from family advocates. But we wanted to remind you that your story is so important. You can't just go in and be like, hey, Child Care Working Families Act, sign on, support it, without your personal story. Because your elected official hears from lobbyists all the time, using facts, using what their return on investment is going to be if they support this, but they don't hear those stories from lobbyists. The stories come from you as advocates. So this slide probably looks familiar if you're on our last webinar. You want to make sure that you cover the background, the challenge, and the next steps. So you want to give who you are. You want to say why this, what you're talking about is a problem or what the challenge is, and provide an action for how to solve the problem. So a few tips on how to make sure your elevator pitch is short and sweet. You want to make sure you're practicing. I know when I've gone in and talked to elected officials, I've practiced multiple times. I've practiced in front of the mirror. I've made sure that I have a couple versions. So I have a 5-minute story, a 10-minute story, and even a 1-minute story. If they're like, you can meet with this person as they're walking to the floor to do a vote. And that happens sometimes. I often have thrown constituents in with, when I've worked at the state level, being like, I'm sorry that this person's running behind. This person has a 3-minute walk from their office to the Senate floor, so you can walk with them and talk with them. And while that seems like kind of, oh, lobbyists do that, we did that with constituents all the time, and constituents that were ready made that time effectively. And then that elected official is sitting on the Senate floor about to vote, thinking about what you just talked about. And that's even more impactful because that's often a time where they're not really thinking, they're not being talked to, they're just having to do a vote quick so they can process what you just said to them. When you are telling your story and doing your elevator pitch, you want to make sure it's one story to one issue and there's not unnecessary extra flowery details. Get to your point and don't overload them with facts. They are going to remember your story more than the facts you say. So if you accompany your story with 2 or 3 compelling facts, that's going to be the most effective way to get your point across. Make sure that you have time for questions and make it a conversation and center on the personal. Again, if you can flip it on them and have them talk to you about their story, that's going to make them feel like they're also being heard. They don't often, they're hearing a lot of stories, hearing a lot of input from lobbyists and from advocates. So if they can think about their own personal experience and feel connected to you, it's going to be super impactful. So we talked about how you're going to have leave behinds, and these are also really important for if you're doing drop-bys as well, to have good handouts to leave behind with your elected officials and staff members. We have 2 examples up here that we at Child Care&R often use in our advocacy. We have the state fact sheets, which we just re-released. We release it every year. We release it this summer. So each state has a summary of child care workforce, child care affordability, and different facts about CCR&Rs, which is a really good 1-page, well, it's about 2 pages to show a good summary and to pull some facts from there as well. We also, this month, will be releasing our 2018 cost of care report, and especially if you're talking about the cost
to you as a parent or to you as a child care center of child care, this is a great report to share and pair solutions with. If you're a CCR&R that is going with a group or has a group of family advocates that you are going together as advocates, one-pagers are a really good way to briefly summarize the issue at hand and also keep a face to the advocate. So these are our examples from our Family Advocate Summit in the spring. I remember Chrissy did, she did some animation here. So it includes an advocate story, including a picture of Julia. It's short and sweet, but it gets to the point. Some statistics. There's not an overload of statistics, just 3 things to show what the state of childcare is in California. And then the congressional request. This is specific. It it gives a really actionable next step for elected officials. And this is a great drop-off if you're doing a drop-by or you have some time and you want to have a couple extra copies and you're like, oh, well, that meeting finished up quick. I'm going to drop by some other folks' offices and just leave behind my information. This can be a big lift if you're just one family advocate, but a good opportunity if it's a family advocate network or a CCR&R that has the capacity to put together these one-pagers so that they're super clear. But if you're a family advocate and you're just going to go on a constituent visit, these state fact sheets and cost of care are quick things you can just print off and have ready to go as well. All right, so now I'm going to pass it over to Liz, who's going to just talk about the importance of using social media in your constituent visits and best practices.
Hello, everyone. This is Liz Twilley. I am the social media manager with Child Care of America. And I'm just going to talk very briefly with you guys about the importance of posting on social media following your constituent visit. Well, first things first, follow Child Care Works on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, please. And if you want to, tag us when you make these posts. We would love to see photos of all of our beautiful advocates meeting with their lawmakers. It would be truly fabulous. And that kind of leads us into number 2, take pictures. You know, it's great to tweet about what happened or maybe post on Facebook, but as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you can't get a candid photo, get a group shot, you know, get a photo with the staffer, and then share it on social media. Talk about the issue, you know, say who you met with, tag your representative. Oh, take horizontal photos is what Chrissy is trying to tell me. Hold your phone hamburger style? Was that what it would be called as opposed to hot dog style?
Yes, I believe so.
Hold your phone horizontally to take your photos. And then, yeah, make a short post or caption basically saying who you met with, what you guys talked about, get another little audience for the issue, and tag your representative. It's another way to kind of later on that day have another little notification reminding them that you met with them and what you talked about, and kind of keep your issue on the top of their mind, as well as just expanding your issue. You know, you might inspire someone else within your community to be like, oh, hey, you know, they met with with their elected official, so can I? And you can kind of create a network that way.
Great. Thanks, Liz. It's always exciting to see pictures of folks meeting with their elected officials and talking about childcare. I love the point you made about how if you see someone do it, if you see a friend do it in your Facebook group or on Twitter, you think, hey, it can't be that hard. I can totally do it too. I think that's a really fun way to encourage people to meet with their elected officials. So this webinar is pretty short and sweet. We have a couple things left before we go. We just want to share a couple of resources we have at Child Care of America and Child Care Works to support you in your advocacy. We have action centers in a variety of states across the country, and we use that for state level and federal advocacy and local advocacy. Alaska is a great example. They did some local advocacy in Juneau using their action center, which is really cool. If you're interested in getting in an action center, getting involved in your action center, feel free to email us. We think that these are great opportunities to send messages to your elected officials and engage a wider audience. Follow us on social media. Liz is constantly sharing great articles that you can learn from, share as well as actions to take and reminders for the importance of childcare. We have our state fact sheets and our cost of care report that we'll have posted on our resources page for this webinar, as well as those one-pagers for our site visits. We actually just completed those one-pagers, and we're using them with a grant that we have, so we're really excited to share them with a more general audience. Any questions in general, getting together a site visit with a group of folks or getting a group to go visit an elected official, let us know. We're happy to support in what way we can. We have 2 more webinars left in our webinar series. Next webinar, we'll be talking about building family advocate networks. This is a great webinar for CCR&Rs who are looking to build a network of folks that can advocate for childcare, as well as family advocates looking to build some of their own networks. We have a couple of guests from California, hopefully on, that we're really excited for, the little teaser, and we are really excited to talk more about that because I think it really brings together, you know, what advocacy looks like, what social media looks like, how to tell your story, how to get FaceTime, well, how to get all those people to do that all at once kind of thing. And then we're really excited for, after the election, of having a webinar about kind of reactions from the elections in general, and then what we're going to do next looking forward. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to engage newly elected officials, so we're going to have our policy folks on and also talk about you know, next steps into 2019. So here's our contact information. Feel free to send us an email. You can also reply to the email that I'm going to send this afternoon after this webinar. Now, for those of you who've held on to the end, I would love to hear how you feel now about planning constituent visits. Let's see. All right, I have no people saying totally in the dark, and about 9% saying confident, ready to go, and 11% unsure. So I feel confident with those numbers, and I hope that those folks who are unsure feel confident to reach out to us to get you to that confident, ready to go. It can seem really intimidating. I was really intimidated to meet with elected officials before I worked for elected officials, and now I kind of feel like I have a secret you know, handbook of that. So I'm excited. I'm happy to share more pointers with you. And then we'd love to hear what else you'd like to learn about. We have a couple of webinars left, and we have time to incorporate this stuff in. If you have others from this webinar or this poll, feel free to type it into the chat box as well. So it looks like folks, yep, building that family advocate network. The next webinar is really going to cover that. And we're happy to engage more with engagement with the elected officials outside of a meeting can seem intimidating just walking up to someone, but we're happy to cover that more as well. Awesome. I'm going to close that poll. Thanks so much for responding for everyone, and thank you everyone for attending today. This can seem kind of like a dry subject of like, how do I schedule a meeting basically, but it is a unique meeting to have to schedule, and your local, from your local to your federal elected officials need to hear from you. So if you think, oh, I can only contact my senator or my representative, that's not true. Your state reps and your city council members, your county commissioners, they all need to hear from you and are great opportunities to educate them about childcare. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar.